These are not your average budget speakers, okay? Edifier says the MR5s, they're a studio grade, but can they back that up? Well, let's find out. Hey guys, Bruce here with Desktop Hi-Fi, and today we're going to be looking at the Edifier MR5 active monitor speakers. Now, whether you're looking for speakers, say, for video editing, music production, for desktop, near-field listening, just everyday listening, well, the MR5 speakers may be just what you're looking for. Now, these were provided at no cost to me by Edifier. However, all opinions are my own. No one's reviewed this video prior to posting. Now let's talk about the unboxing and build quality of the MR5s. Let's see what you get for your hard-earned money. Well, the MR5s, they come double boxed, so that ensures you're going to get them safe and sound. And on the top of the box is where all the accessories are found. So first, you get this quick start guide that comes in multiple languages. Then you get the RCA cables and a 3.5mm auxiliary cable. There's also a 10-foot DIN cable to connect to the left passive speaker to the right active speaker. There's also an IEC C7 power cord, you know, the kind with the two holes. Now, the MR5s come protected in plastic wrap. By the way, they're available in white or black. I prefer the white color myself. So with a 3.5-inch mid-driver, there's also a clips-like copper color. Physically, these are rather large, larger than your typical computer speakers. They are definitely more of a bookshelf size, and they measure 6.26 inches wide, 10.39 inches tall, 10 inches in depth. Oh, by the way, they weigh about 11 pounds each. The cabinet, well, it's made of MDF. It's got a really thick front plastic bezel. On the right speaker, which is by default the active speaker, that's where all the controls and the inputs and outputs are located. Now, of interest is a 5-inch long throw down firing woofer, which can be controlled via either the Edifier Connects app or physical knobs on the rear. On the front is a 1-inch silk dome tweeter and with a dimpled waveguide. Then there's a 3.5-inch mid-driver, and on the sides of the speakers is bass ports, providing, I think, really surprisingly deep bass from such a small package. Now, the active speaker has a 3.5mm headphone jack and a 3.5mm auxiliary jack input. Now, the main control is a metal multifunction knob. It's really a nice knurled knob with a great touch to it. Unfortunately, there isn't a visible way to see the volume level. It turns continuously. Now, a small LED on the left of the knob indicates the mode the speaker is using. So whether it's one of the 3 sound effects modes, it will either be red, green, or white. It blinks when it's in pairing mode. And on the rear, the RCA input for analog inputs, TRS balanced inputs, and more professional use such as mixing boards, audio interfaces, and more. Next, there are XLR-type balanced connections. Then there are 2 knobs for high frequency and low frequency adjustments that allow for plus or minus 6 dB. Now, there are some instructions for using the Connects app settings for small room correction. There is a small button for pairing Bluetooth buttons, and finally at the bottom is the DIN connection for the passive speaker and the power input. The power supply is built in, thank the Lord. I just can't take any more bricks. Features and specs. So now first, let's talk about some of the features of the MR5. There are 3 Class D amplifiers, a 10-watt amplifier for the tweeters, 15 for the mid-drivers, and 30 watts for the bass. Now these can get really loud, but the real idea is this ruler flat frequency response, from which Edifier claims is between 46 to 40 kilohertz. Total power output of 110 watts and sound pressure level of 101 dB at 1 meter. So yes, they can get quite loud and fill a decent sized room with sound. Another feature is its Bluetooth capability. The MR5 is Bluetooth version 6 and currently supports LDAC and SBC, and it does so up to 24-bit 96 kilohertz. Now, the MR5 also lets you connect up to 2 different Bluetooth devices at the same time. The built-in active crossover splits bass and mids at 155 Hz, mid and treble at 2600 Hz. Now, let's take a look at some other features that do require the Connects app. There are 3 different sound effects available in the app: monitor, music, and custom. These are essentially built-in EQ settings with the ability to create and save your own. Now, I didn't have much discernible difference between the music and monitor settings. Maybe the music was just tilted a little bit north of neutral. Now, acoustic tuning allows you to change things such as the low frequency cutoff. Acoustic space, well, that's for bass control. For example, if the speaker is placed, say, in a corner, you can cut the bass by up to 4 dB. In desktop control, well, that attempts to remediate an increase in frequencies when the unit is placed directly on a desktop, for example. You do need to connect the MR5s via Bluetooth to use the app. However, most functions do continue to work when provided an analog source as opposed to Bluetooth. There is a settings menu that allows you to swap the left and right speakers, your user manual, power saving mode, which by default powers the speakers down after 15 minutes. Now, one thing I'm very interested in is how easy something is to set up and how fiddly it is. So, as far as setup is concerned on these, it's really simple. You just plug in the power, your source, download the Edifier Connects app, connect via Bluetooth. However, that's not even really required to use MR5s, but it's highly recommended. There were no obvious glitches getting things going. I do wish the volume knob wasn't a continuous adjustment. The RCA and auxiliary inputs are useful to connect things like a CD player or perhaps a streamer, or a turntable has its own preamp. I want to share my listening impressions with these. So to answer that question, how does it sound? Well, I'm glad you asked. Let me start with the gear that I use for evaluation. For a source, I use both a WEAM Mini connected to the Topping D70 Pro Sabre DAC, and I use Tidal for streaming. I also use the Topping D70 Pro with the SMSL PL100 CD transport. Now for music, I mix things up a bit for the music used for listening tests. And I'll start with using Miles Davis's So What track from Kinda Blue. The soundstage was just a bit on the narrow side, but I attribute that to being a bit close together on the test bench. It was certainly more than acceptable, and the imaging was impressive and provided excellent experience. I then moved on to Lord's Pure Heroin album, and the track Royals is a great test of the mid-range presence, low-end control, and bass response. The MR5s, they were able to peel away many of the layers of the music while preserving detail. And I like that quite a bit. Now, I happen to be a huge Eagles fan, and one of their best live recordings is from the album Hell Freezes Over. And the track Hotel California is a great way to test the overall dynamics, whether it's the micro or macro dynamics of the MR5s. And there's a lot of acoustic string detail in this tune that, for the most part, the Edifier's got them right. Now, I also listened to Billie Eilish's album When We Fall Asleep. And I gotta tell you, it's very powerful, lots of bass, spatial separation. I can tell you that these powered speakers held up their end without the bass being too muddy at all. Although I really couldn't find much fault with the MR5 speaker's sound quality, I did notice at times the mids seemed to be a bit on the recessed side. However, a few simple tweaks in the Edifier app brought them forward, but not overly so. I, of course, am keeping their price range, size, and placement in mind when I think that, yeah, Edifier really knocked it out of the park with these speakers. Now, to compare this with another pair of studio monitors, I happen to have the Adam D3Vs, which, by the way, sells for exactly the same price, $349. Now, I have to admit, in some circumstances, the D3V can be a bit better in low-end extension, and the AMT tweeter is probably a little less fatiguing after a long listening section. However, the MR5 is a solid performer, and it's just overall larger and I think more capable of room-filling sound. The Connects app adds to the utility of the MR5s as well. So in summary, the MR5 isn't just a passive speaker, it's a tunable desktop monitor with both manual and app-based DSP control. Now you can achieve flat and accurate sound, especially in monitor mode, or you can tailor the EQ for, different use cases or speaker placements. Well, that's my review of the Edifier MR5 active desktop monitor speakers. Now, if you like this video, please hit that subscribe button and the like button as well. It helps the channel a lot. And I'll see you in the next video.